Now, the Department of International Relations and Cooperation has initiated formal diplomatic engagements with both the United States and Kenya to resolve the matter of 7 Kenyan nationals who abused their tourist visas. The Department of Home Affairs, in the meantime, is collaborating with law enforcement agencies, and that led to the arrest of the Kenyan nationals for the abuse of their tourist visas. Home Affairs says that they violated the South African immigration laws. To help us unpack this matter, we joined now by international relations expert and former ambassador, Dr. Kingsley Makhubele. Dr. Makhubele, thank you so much for making the time to speak to us this morning. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thanks very much, Sakina.
I'm tempted to jump straight to where we are, but then there's a part of me that says, Dr. Makhubele, we first need to actually place this whole incident in context. So what actually happened here?
You know, Sakina, the Vienna Convention spells out diplomatic function. And in Article 3, it defines about 5 diplomatic functions. And if you look at this function, they are called diplomatic functions of the mission. Now, the mission are clearly defined. Now, I have seen in the past protests from the US. For instance, there was supposed to be some military activities where they were supposed to send their military. They couldn't do that because the US was arguing that they were not giving diplomatic immunities. Now, diplomatic immunities are not given willy-nilly. It's something that you consider very seriously before you extend. And that's one thing that I think we've created unnecessary precedent. If you carry a diplomatic passport and you are not an accredited diplomat, Sakina, you don't have immunities and privileges. But usually states would extend some level of courtesies for diplomatic passport, not immunities. Now, in this instance, there are things that are not clear because sometimes, I think early this year, there were reports that the United States is considering sending Kenyans to come and process the Afrikaners here. I don't know. And they said they were in discussion with the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. I don't know if this permission was given, what are the conditions, but if permission was given, it's a bit unfortunate. Now, if you read the statement that was published and attributed to Tommy Piggott, who is the deputy spokesperson at the State Department, he really provides some warnings to South Africa that are very concerning. I mean, one of the things that he says is that they can't comment in details about the incident until they have details. But he then goes on to say they expect cooperation and accountability from the South African government, a big problem. Then he goes on to say that they find it unacceptable that South Africa interferes with their refugee operation. Now, do we have a refugee operation in this country that the United States can willingly set up? That's a huge challenge. If they were given permission, it's something else. But there's nothing called a refugee operation in terms of the function of diplomatic missions. So that's where the huge challenge is. And those are the issues that I think with time we'll get much better clarity and details about this matter.
And thanks so much for contextualizing that for us, because, as you say, there are still so many questions that need to be answered. But is it usual, Dr. Makhubele, for refugee applications to be processed, to be handled in the same country where the alleged persecution is taking place for those applying?
Sakina, you are spot on. The definition of refugee by nature, it's somebody who runs away from persecution, be it on the basis of their political belief, religious, and so on. So they are running from persecution. That's why they are in a third country to seek refugee status. It's unprecedented and unheard of that refugees are processed in the country where they are. If there's any threat to them, they ought not to be there because they should have been maybe in Swaziland or somewhere else because they are persecuted in South Africa. That's a huge challenge. But if you look at the Convention on the Status of Refugees, it really spells out some details. I mean, you have a part that deals with administrative function of that. I think that's Article 24, 25 of the convention. And this is where you process refugees from outside. Then there's a responsibility in terms of the countries where they are coming from to repatriate any asset they may have left behind. So those are contained in the convention. But if you hear people saying that, well, South Africa is a state party to the Convention on Refugees, violating that, I'll be very keen to understand what part of the convention, because if you look at the convention, it speaks about the status and the protection of refugees. And here, these are people who drive and they are renting some of their homes and they are in the US, they still collect taxes or rates for their renter. But the challenge is going to arise, Sakina, with respect to Article 28 of the Refugee Convention. Because Article 28 says, you know, if they are in the United States, the South African government are not entitled to extend, in this case, consular services to them because they are no longer there. So the country where they are ought to protect them because you can't provide consular services to people that you are persecuting by nature. So those are misnomers that we're starting to see in this respect. And that's going to raise a huge challenge in terms of what is a refugee and how to treat refugees in future. I'm just afraid that we are diluting the impact of refugees. There are genuine refugees around the world who ought to be given some level of protection. In this case, it's creating a huge problem.
And notwithstanding that the US would have their prerogative as to who they employ or not, but why then would they need these 7 Kenyan nationals to be brought in to do this work?
You know, Sakina, you know, as I said, there was a report that they are contemplating to bring Kenyans and they are in discussion with DIRCO. I don't know what happened. If DIRCO declined that, then they are in total violation of staying in the country. If DIRCO has agreed that they can bring their the Kenyan nationality to come and assist in the processing, it's a total different matter because within the Vienna Convention or within any refugee convention, on reciprocal basis, you can work out certain modalities. In this case, it seems South Africa did not acquiesce to any Kenyans coming into the country, which means that the Americans are actually disregarding the sovereignty of the country. I mean, I've seen reports in the international media, Sakina, saying that 2 American nationals were detained. I hope these nationals who are alleged to have been detained are not diplomats. One thing that South Africa can't do is to arrest accredited diplomats. But if you get Americans who are not accredited diplomats, even though they carry diplomatic passport and they are involved in illegal activity, they can be arrested. They have no immunities. They are standing, it's not protected. A diplomatic passport, Sakina, does not necessarily equate to diplomatic immunities. That's the thing that I used to tell people when I was in protocol, because everyone wanted a diplomatic passport and they thought it provides them immunities. It doesn't.
And of course, many people concerned, Dr. Makhubele, because diplomatic relations between South Africa and the United States have deteriorated since Trump's executive order on South Africa and this issue around refugees in particular. So people are concerned that this may further exacerbate those tensions.
Well, looking at the statement from the State Department, quite clearly, the escalation ladder, people keep on climbing it. But I think this is one fight that South Africa should pick up and pick up this fight within the realm of diplomacy and argue around the diplomacy. I'm a strong believer in diplomatic function and diplomatic practice, and this is a classical example where you invoke the diplomatic function and argue on the basis of that. And I think in this respect, South Africa should stand firm because part of the integrity and the sovereignty of the country is at stake. If we were to allow the Americans to carry any form of operation in this country without due regard to the local laws and processes, it would be unfortunate. South Africa cannot move to the United States and say we're setting up an entity there to deal with drug trafficking from the US and so on. You can't do that. You got to work with the country, receiving country. In this case, South Africa should pick up this fight because this is all about the sovereignty of the country, and it's within the realm of the diplomatic function. It's within the realm of the diplomatic statecraft where South Africa should fight this issue.
So, as we understand, Dr. Makhubele, DIRCO is in fact doing just that. What would be the messages to Kenya and the US respectively that DIRCO should be conveying?
Well, the Kenyan, I don't think the government is involved in sanctioning this. Quite clearly, these people were recruited by this non-governmental organization. This non-governmental organization has been functioning in South Africa for many years, I think since 1990. They were involved in the repatriation of South Africans, settling South African refugees who were coming back at that stage. But if they violated their terms of operation, South Africa has the right actually to tell them to pack their bags and leave if they are violating that within the law. So everything must be done within the framework of the law, and South Africa, I think, has all the instruments to combat this. If they start to employ people who are not having a necessary documentation to come and work for them, I'm talking about at the World Church Services, South Africa has a right actually to take action against them, has a right even to put penalties, take them to court. There can be levied penalties for the violation of the local law. So there are different instruments that the country can use to really try to resolve this. But with respect to the discussion that would go on between Kenya, the United States, and South Africa, it's a matter that South Africa must reiterate its sovereign right and to the Americans. The Americans must understand they can't set up any operation in the country without the concurrence of the country and in violation of South African laws.
So it's an interesting one, no doubt, and of course, one that we will keep an eye on. Dr. Makhubele, as always, a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time. And that, of course, was Dr. Kingsley Makhubele, international relations expert and former ambassador, speaking to us about this story about the 7 Kenyan nationals who abused their tourist visas. So let us know your thoughts. That's also our question of the day.